Have you ever wondered what it would feel like to wake up one day and realize that everything you've ever believed in might not be enough? Imagine standing in the ruins of your life, surrounded by the shattered pieces of your faith, and asking yourself, what now? This is not just a question of faith, but a question of survival, identity, and purpose. Today we're diving into a story that begins with a storm that didn't just destroy buildings, but shattered lives, beliefs, and the very foundation of a community. This is the story of Detroit, a city that faced an unimaginable disaster, and the people who found themselves questioning everything they thought they knew. It was Monday, February 17th, 2025. Detroit, a city known for its resilience, was blanketed in the quiet stillness of winter. The snow-covered streets and the faint hum of life gave the city a sense of calm, but that calm was about to be shattered. By mid-morning, the sky turned an ominous shade of grey. Thick black clouds rolled in as if the heavens themselves were preparing for battle. The air grew heavy, and the first drops of rain began to fall. What started as a typical winter storm quickly escalated into something far more sinister. The winds howled like a pack of wolves, tearing through the city with a ferocity no one had ever seen. Rain turned to sleet, and sleet turned to snow, until the city was engulfed in a blinding whiteout. But the worst was yet to come. Without warning, a snow tornado, a rare and terrifying phenomenon, touched down in the heart of Detroit. It was as if nature itself had declared war on the city. The tornado ripped through neighborhoods, uprooting trees, flipping cars, and reducing buildings to rubble. The streets, once quiet and serene, were now flooded with icy water as the drainage systems overflowed. Homes were submerged, and the city's infrastructure crumbled under the weight of the storm. Amidst the chaos, one building stood as a symbol of hope and resilience: St. Joseph's Church. For decades, the church had been a spiritual sanctuary for the people of Detroit. Its towering steeple and stained glass windows were a testament to the faith of the community. But even this sacred place was not spared. Inside the church, Reverend Thomas Daniels was leading a service. Despite the worsening weather, the congregation had gathered, seeking solace in the familiar rituals of their faith. Reverend Thomas, a man known for his unwavering devotion, stood at the altar, his voice steady as he delivered his sermon. "In times of trouble, we must hold fast to our faith," he said, his words echoing through the sanctuary. "God is with us, even in the darkest of storms." But as the storm outside grew louder, so did the unease within the church. The windows rattled and the lights flickered. Suddenly, a deafening crash shook the building. The congregation screamed as the roof groaned under the pressure of the wind. Reverend Thomas tried to maintain order, urging everyone to stay calm, but it was too late. The windows shattered and the roof began to collapse. Debris rained down, and the once peaceful sanctuary was transformed into a scene of chaos and terror. Reverend Thomas rushed to help his congregation, but the path to the door was blocked by rubble. The floodwaters surged into the church, adding to the devastation. In the midst of the chaos, Reverend Thomas found himself holding a woman who had fallen, her face pale with fear. "We will be safe," he whispered, though he wasn't sure he believed it himself. But the storm was relentless. The snow tornado grew stronger, tearing the roof off the church and sending it spiraling into the sky. The walls crumbled, and the church collapsed, burying everything and everyone inside. When Reverend Thomas woke up, he was surrounded by debris. His body ached, but the pain in his heart was far greater. He looked around at the ruins of the church, his mind racing with questions. Why did this happen? Why did God allow this? The days that followed were a blur of grief and confusion. The city of Detroit was in shambles, and the survivors were left to pick up the pieces of their lives. Reverend Thomas and his congregation gathered in temporary shelters, their faith shaken to its core. As the city struggled to recover, Reverend Thomas found himself grappling with questions he had never asked before. The church, once a symbol of hope, was now a pile of rubble. The faith that had sustained him for so long no longer seemed enough. One evening, as he sat alone in the ruins of the church, Reverend Thomas received a message from Imam Iman, a Muslim religious leader in the community. Imam Iman had heard about the disaster and wanted to offer his support. At first, Reverend Thomas was hesitant. He had always been a man of strong faith, and the idea of seeking guidance from someone outside his religion felt foreign. But he was desperate for answers, and so he agreed to meet with Imam Iman. Their conversation was unlike anything Reverend Thomas had ever experienced. Imam Iman spoke of faith, resilience, and the importance of finding peace in the midst of chaos. He shared teachings from the Quran, emphasizing the importance of submission to God and the pursuit of inner peace. Reverend Thomas listened intently, his mind racing with thoughts and questions. For the first time in weeks, he felt a glimmer of hope. As Reverend Thomas delved deeper into Islamic teachings, he began to feel a sense of peace he had never known before. But this newfound peace came with a price. His decision to explore Islam was met with resistance from some members of his congregation and the broader Christian community. "How can you turn your back on your faith?" one of his closest friends asked. "You've spent your entire life preaching about Jesus. How can you just walk away from that?" Reverend Thomas struggled with these questions. He didn't want to abandon his faith, but he also couldn't ignore the peace he had found in Islam. He felt torn between two worlds, unsure of which path to take. In the end, Reverend Thomas made a decision that would change his life forever. He chose to embrace Islam, not as a rejection of his past, but as a continuation of his spiritual journey. The story of Reverend Thomas and the city of Detroit is a powerful reminder of the resilience of the human spirit. It's a story about faith, loss, and the search for meaning in the face of unimaginable adversity. The wind howled like a banshee. Reverend Thomas watched in disbelief as the storm transformed from a peaceful snowfall into a raging monster. His heart pounded in his chest. This was no ordinary storm. A deafening crack split the air. The roof of St. Joseph's, unable to withstand the onslaught, caved in. Dust and debris rained down on the terrified congregation. Screams filled the air, echoing the chaos of the collapsing structure. Reverend Thomas was thrown to the ground. He coughed, his eyes stinging from the dust. He could hear the terrified cries of his parishioners, but he couldn't see them. The air was thick with debris and fear. "Help me!" someone cried out. Reverend Thomas struggled to his feet. He had to help them. He had to get them out. But the church, his sanctuary, was crumbling around him, and the storm raged on, a monstrous echo of the destruction within. The snow tornado, a freak of nature, finally moved on, leaving behind a trail of devastation. St. Joseph's Church, once a beacon of hope, was now a pile of rubble. The storm had taken lives, shattered families. It had shaken the city to its core. Reverend Thomas, physically unharmed but deeply wounded, stared at the ruins of his church. He felt lost, adrift in a sea of grief and doubt. He had always believed in God's plan, but this felt senseless. Where was God in all this suffering? He looked up at the sky, now a clear and heartbreaking blue. The storm had passed, leaving behind an eerie silence. But in the silence, Reverend Thomas heard only the echoes of his shattered faith. He felt a coldness within him, a void where his faith used to be. An unexpected hand. Days turned into weeks. Detroit began the long, arduous task of rebuilding. Amidst the loss and despair, stories of resilience emerged. Neighbors helping neighbors, strangers sharing food and shelter. The human spirit, though battered, refused to be broken. Reverend Thomas, however, remained lost. He couldn't shake the feeling of emptiness, the gnawing doubt that had taken root in his soul. He felt like a shepherd who had lost his flock, a captain whose ship had sunk. One day, while walking through the devastated streets, he encountered a man he had often seen from a distance. Imam Iman, the leader of the local mosque, a place Reverend Thomas had never stepped foot in. The Imam, recognizing the lost look in the Reverend's eyes, offered a warm smile and a hand up. The Quran and the Cross. This chapter delves into the profound encounter between two men of faith, each seeking solace and understanding in a world torn by conflict and natural disasters. Imam Iman, sensing Reverend Thomas's inner turmoil, invited him into the mosque. The invitation was more than a gesture of hospitality. It was an offering of peace and a bridge between two worlds. The mosque, miraculously spared from the storm's wrath, was a haven of peace. Its walls, untouched by the chaos outside, seemed to whisper stories of resilience and faith. The air hummed with quiet prayer. Each murmur, each bead counted, was a testament to the unwavering faith of its people. Reverend Thomas, hesitant at first, felt a sense of calm wash over him. The serenity of the mosque contrasted sharply with the turmoil in his heart, offering a momentary refuge. Over cups of strong sweet tea, Imam Iman spoke about Islam. His words were not just informative, but filled with a warmth that transcended language. He spoke of compassion, of surrender to God's will, of finding peace in the face of adversity. His voice carried the weight of centuries of wisdom and the lightness of genuine kindness. He handed Reverend Thomas a Quran, his fingers brushing the worn leather. The gesture was simple yet profound, symbolizing a shared quest for understanding. Reverend Thomas, his heart heavy with his own scriptures, found himself drawn to the words of the Quran. The verses spoke to him in a way he hadn't anticipated, resonating with his own spiritual journey. He saw echoes of his own faith, familiar themes of love, forgiveness, and the power of prayer. The similarities were striking, and they began to blur the lines that had once seemed so clear. He began to see that faith, in its purest form, transcended the boundaries of religion. It was a revelation that brought him closer to understanding the universal truths that bind humanity together. Whispers of disbelief. Word spread through the remnants of Reverend Thomas's congregation that he was spending time at the mosque, reading the Quran. This news was met with a mixture of shock and curiosity. The mosque, a place many had never entered, now became a symbol of their reverend's unexpected journey. Whispers turned into murmurs, then accusations. The congregation, already fragile from the storm's aftermath, found themselves grappling with this new reality. How could their shepherd stray so far from the flock? The man they had looked up to for guidance and strength was now walking a path they did not understand. Reverend Thomas, once a pillar of certainty, now found himself questioning everything. The storm had not only ravaged the city, but also his beliefs. He stood amidst the ruins, contemplating the fragility of life and faith. He understood their fear, their confusion. He had been their rock, and now he was the one seeking solace and answers. The community's pain mirrored his own internal struggle. He too had once believed in the rigidity of lines, in the separation of faiths. The storm had shattered not just buildings but also the walls he had built around his own beliefs. But the storm, in its terrible destruction, had cleared a new path for him. It was as if the winds had blown away the old, making room for new perspectives and understandings. He saw now that faith was not about buildings or scriptures, but about the human spirit's connection to something greater. It was about the bonds formed in times of crisis, the unity that emerged from shared suffering. It was about finding hope in despair, love in the face of loss. The acts of kindness he witnessed, the selflessness of strangers, all pointed to a deeper truth, and he found himself drawn to the warmth and resilience of the Muslim community, their faith an anchor in the storm. Their prayers, their solidarity, offered him a new kind of sanctuary, one that transcended the boundaries he once held dear. A bridge over ruins. The rebuilding of St. Joseph's began in the spring. It was slow, painstaking work, but with each brick laid, each beam raised, came a renewed sense of hope. The community, though scarred, was determined to rise from the ashes. Reverend Thomas, his heart still heavy with the memories of the storm, found himself drawn to the reconstruction efforts at the mosque. He worked side by side with Imam Iman and members of both communities, their shared loss forging a bond stronger than any differences. He saw then the true power of faith not to divide but to unite. He saw that compassion and empathy were not confined by religious doctrines, but resided in the shared humanity that connected them all. The ruins of St. Joseph's became a bridge, not a barrier. The resilience of faith. Years later, a new St. Joseph's Church stood tall in Detroit. It was not just a building, but a beacon of hope and resilience for the entire community. It was a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, a symbol of hope rebuilt from the ruins. The community had come together, brick by brick, to restore what was lost, and in doing so, they had found a renewed sense of purpose and unity. And every Sunday, Reverend Thomas, his faith renewed and transformed, shared his pulpit with Imam Iman. Their collaboration was more than symbolic. It was a living example of interfaith harmony and mutual respect. They spoke of the lessons learned from the storm, of the power of unity, of the universality of faith. Their messages resonated deeply, touching the hearts of all who listened. They spoke of the Quran and the Bible, finding common ground in their shared values. They highlighted the teachings that emphasized compassion, love, and understanding, bridging the gap between different faiths. And the congregation, a tapestry of faiths and backgrounds, listened with open hearts. They found solace and strength in the words of their leaders, and in the unity that had blossomed from adversity. The snow tornado, in its unimaginable fury, had inadvertently revealed a deeper truth. It had shown the fragility of life, but also the incredible resilience that lies within each of us. But it's also a story about leadership, about the courage to question, to explore, and to embrace change, even when it's difficult. Reverend Thomas's journey is a testament to the power of faith, not as a set of rigid beliefs, but as a living, evolving relationship with the divine. With that said, thanks for watching, and until next time, remember, the storms of life may shake us, but they can also lead us to new beginnings.